Hey, what's going on, Freedom Ninjas? It's Jeff King here. And today we're going to talk about culture and how we can talk about culture to bridge the gap between minarchists and anarchists. But before we do that, please hit that subscribe button so we can continue to grow this channel and add more followers. So last week I was in Virginia for the Young Americans for Liberty National Convention. And for the 5 nights that I was there, I was on a mission to convert as many minarchists to anarchism as I could. But not to be like a martyr of anarchy, but rather I wanted to learn why people believe in almost no government, but still believe in some use of force. So I was able to convince all but 3 people of the virtues of anarchism, 2 of whom couldn't get past the idea of privatized courts, while the other provided insight into the link which will be bringing anarchists and minarchists together. So on the last night of the convention, I was warned not to go talk to this guy who is a minarchist and who is known to lose his mind when people try to explain the virtues of a voluntary society to him. So naturally I went over to go talk to him and work my way into a conversation about a voluntarist society. The conversation with him helped me learn how to message anarchism to minarchists without anybody getting booty tickled and with both sides agreeing to the outcome. What eventually happened with the conversation was that I agreed with him and he agreed with me. So here's how it went down. So I believe for the most part that politics is downstream of culture, which means a region's culture will decide what type of politicians and policies become law. Politicians are reactive to people. Culture is always changing. Cultures always change, especially here in the United States. Now, I'm not making the claim that government doesn't have an influence on culture. I think it does. But what I would argue for the most part is that politicians react to culture instead of culture reacting and adjusting to politicians. And here is a simple example. Mexico has laws against murder. Mexico also has gun laws that would make the straw-banning California socialists' wet dreams come true. If you want to buy a gun in Mexico, you have to obtain a license, a process which requires you to pass a background check. That background check looks at criminal history, mental history, physical health, and any past drug addiction. But wait, the socialist dreams are about to come true because there's more. Applicants who want to own a gun in Mexico also need to give 6 other pieces of documentation: a birth certificate, a letter confirming employment, proof of a clean criminal record from the Attorney General's office in the application's home state, a utility bill, and a current address, and a copy of a government-issued ID, and a federal social security number. On top of all that, Mexico has 1 legal gun store in the entire nation where citizens can go to legally buy a gun. Mexico has far fewer guns than the United States. It's estimated that for every 100 residents in Mexico, there are 15 guns, and in the United States, for every 100 residents, there are 88 guns. Now, despite Mexico having fewer guns and the same laws making murder illegal, Mexico, as a culture, has 5 times the homicide rate that of the United States. Same laws, less guns, 5 times as many murders. Now, what causes that difference? Is it laws or is it culture? I would argue that it's culture, as the laws are almost identical. Now here's another example. Guatemala has just 13.2 guns per 100 residents. The United States, remember, is at 88. So even though Guatemala has 13.2 guns per 100 residents, it has an average of 386 murders per million residents, and the USA is at 42 murders per million. Same laws, way less guns, and 9 times as many murders. Laws or culture? I think it's definitely culture. Okay, so now that we've established that politics is downstream of culture, my question to you minarchists is, how much would America's culture have to change in order for the people here to embrace a minarchist government? Now, I'm assuming when we talk about minarchism, what we're talking about is a government which simply provides national defense, local and regional common law courts. Most minarchists are okay with privatized police so long as they are kept in check by the government courts and a national military just in case a private police agency decides to go rogue. Now, anyone who is a minarchist is intelligent enough to realize that America's culture would need to change in a dramatic way in order to allow for a minarchist state to flourish. The American people will need to make the connection that their actions to vote for a politician to steal the resources of others is no different than hiring a gangster to steal the resources of others. Our culture would need to transition from one which uses coercive governmental power to manage the habits of others, and transition to one which uses persuasion to manage and influence the habits of others. We would need to realize that the private sector can indeed make roads and bridges and schools and dams, and that customers and Yelp are the best regulators, not some distant bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. The people of the United States would have to evolve and embrace persuasion over coercion in all aspects of their life. Because in a minarchist state, disputes will not be dealt by state action. Rather, disputes will be resolved by the private sector and arbitration, unless there is a victim, in which case you would go to the government court. If America is ever to be a minarchist state, the people here would have to learn to love and trust in each other's humanity enough to allow each other to be free. We would have to evolve our culture to a level of human respect which currently does not exist and which libertarians are trying to embed in our society. All libertarians are trying to raise the cultural ethics of society, whether you're a minarchist or an anarchist. In short, our culture and the people within it would need to progress to a point of using persuasion in all aspects of our lives where governmental coercion used to be the norm. Even in a minarchist state, the police and military would be reactionary forces, forces which the average person would hardly come into contact with unless their actions violated the life, liberty, or property of another individual and therefore created a victim. Minarchism can never be achieved without a cultural shift towards trade over tariffs, freedom over borders, common law over political law, free market education over government monopolized education, and trust over distrust, and persuasion over coercion. To shrink our government to that minuscule of a level would require that the people of the United States become self-sufficient in all aspects of their lives. No government roads, or schools, or certifications, or welfare. In a minarchist state, all actions by the people will be from a voluntary perspective. Now, if our culture ever got to that point of being ready for a minarchist state, then we would simultaneously be ready for an anarchist state. A culture which would allow for a minarchist state is the same culture which would allow for a voluntary state, or anarchy. So minarchists, welcome to Anarchy. We share the same values. Now let's work together to make your minarchist state a reality. And once the people are ready for that and the culture has shifted, we can swiftly abolish what's left of the state and move to a voluntary society. So at the Young Americans for Liberty convention, when I had this conversation with that gentleman, we came to the conclusion that the values within a culture that would allow for a minarchist state are the same values that would allow for an anarchist state. And so he agreed with me, and I agreed with him. And that's the thing with King.